freedom of speech guarantees the right of the citizens to participate in the democratic process, and the freedom of the media is a condition sine qua non for democracy. The press should provide information on political subjects and on subjects which are of public interest. The freedom of the press is one of the best tools for forming opinions and political positions. It enables the politicians to get acquainted with the subjects, with topics of interest to the general public. The right to criticize politicians, senior officials, and government bodies is guaranteed in the European Convention on Human Rights. The right to criticize the government is also guaranteed, as is the right to write on all matters of public interest. In a democratic system of government, the action or inaction of government should be a subject of analysis not only by the penal institutions, not only by the judiciary, but also by the media. In practice, however, the freedom of speech is a value which needs protecting. Lawsuits against journalists are frequent, mainly for slander. Compensations are usually sought rather than moral redress, and in this way the freedom of speech is being curtailed.
Undoubtedly, after 1989, Bulgaria has advanced in terms of freedom of expression. This freedom developed so well that out of doing so much of expression of their free thoughts, some people forget about their jobs.
Journalists can be sued not only when there is a premeditated act, but also inadvertent damage done because of lack of due care. When it is recognized that a journalist has impaired the honor and the good name and reputation of someone, the publisher who owns or publishes the newspaper or the respective media can also be sued. Such administrative sanctions can bring down and close down a newspaper, for instance, because some small newspapers will not be in a position to pay such large sums. Large media take care to guarantee the defense, to provide the lawyers to defend the accused, but at the local level it is different. Even some local members of the bar refuse to defend journalists because they risk being they risk getting into the bad books of the local senior civil servants, governors, and so on. Current practice in criminal proceedings is very close to the European criteria, though some modifications still need to be made. But in civil cases, things remain unchanged for more than half a century, and there is a lot to be done to improve the current situation and guarantee the freedom of speech in full measure.
I believe that there is a goodwill to find this balance both on the part of politicians and on the part of journalists, and it is possible to solve the remaining problems with a couple of amendments to the current legislation, and after then Bulgaria will be exemplary in the European Union in terms of respect for the freedom of speech.
We certainly don't believe that there should be any kind of punitive measures taken against journalists when it comes to defamation. Any defamation judgment should be there to try and address the damage that an individual has felt after he's been defamed. There shouldn't be punitive criminal charges and certainly not imprisonment for case of defamation inside the EU. Another problem which we at the IPI feel is becoming more of a problem in Europe in general is the undermining of journalists' right to protect the confidentiality of their sources, which is a fundamental necessity that a journalist has in order to be able to actually successfully go about their job. This happens principally in two ways. A, any journalist that is forced to reveal their sources instantly loses their credibility, and it's going to become a lot more difficult for them to perform their job in the future. B, as stated before, the right to maintain the secrecy of sources is fundamental. Without that, we'll see sources come forward a lot more often with information that is vitally important for the public to know.
The freedom of expression and the ways in which it can be protected and guaranteed, and ways in which rules on libel and slander can be used in a way so that they're not abused. I would also like to join Mrs. Bretenova and Mr. Vasiliev in their appeal to continue this discussion further, this time in Bulgaria.
As a liberal, freedom is essential to my worldview. The freedom to think, the freedom to move, the freedom to live your life without arbitrary restriction is essential to the liberal society in which innovation can prosper and in which dignity can be preserved. And I think we owe a huge debt of gratitude to those people, whether they are in politics, whether they're in the media, or whether they are fighting for the rights of particular groups in society who are under threat, who put their own safety and their own lives on the line in pursuit of what they believe. I'm sure that you've heard from the excellent speakers, Mr. Vasiliev and Mr. Peters, that we've had today, about the current picture in Europe. There is certainly no case for complacency. We've recently had two major media surveys, one in November of last year and one in February of this year, by the Association of European Journalists, which have pointed out all of the problems that we face over 20 countries, from Russia to the United Kingdom. We know that there is physical violence and even murder of journalists. We know that national governments are increasingly responsible for restrictive laws which make the work of journalists very difficult, if not impossible. We have recently seen journalists prosecuted under secrecy laws. Phone tapping of the media has grown. The right of journalists to protect their sources is being placed in fresh doubt, as a recent case in Ireland has shown us. The politicization of public broadcasting is a major problem in some Central and Eastern European countries, in Poland particularly at the moment. The concentration of media ownership is another problem that we all face, and even in a country which many of us considered a reasonably healthy democracy like Italy, we can see the impact that somebody like Silvio Berlusconi, combining political and media power, can have. But we have a major task ahead of us together as politicians and journalists to promote and to safeguard freedom of reporting and freedom of information. The very fact that we have held this seminar will have helped to move things forward. And we will certainly be working in the run-up to the European elections next year and in the new Parliament to try to get a greater recognition at official level in the European Union of the huge importance of an unfettered right to report.